This is a story set in Babelton. The opening scene takes place at night, showing a house. The person living there is named Jarvis, who runs a furniture business. 4 of his friends are visiting him: Grace, Peter, Jody, and Connor. Among them, Peter and Grace are husband and wife. The 4 of them say goodbye to Jarvis and leave. However, someone sitting in a car secretly takes photos of them. For now, we don't know who this person is. After his friends leave, Jarvis goes inside his house. Outside, behind a tree, a stranger wearing a hoodie is hiding. This, too, is being photographed by the person in the car. A little later, Jarvis receives messages from his girlfriend asking, "Why are you avoiding me? We need to talk about this." While reading the messages, Jarvis hears a noise from outside. Next to his house is a workshop where he makes furniture. Suddenly, the light in the workshop turns on. Curious about who could be in there, Jarvis goes to check. Someone is standing there, though their identity isn't revealed. Jarvis says, "Oh, it's you," indicating that the person is someone Jarvis knows. The scene cuts to the heroine, named Nellie, who works as an advice columnist for a magazine. Readers write letters about their problems, and she selects one to respond to. Nellie doesn't know anyone in Babelton personally, nor does she know much about the people there. That day, as she reviews the letters sent to her, one catches her attention. It has no return address. She opens it to find that it is from a woman worried about being deceived by her boyfriend. The letter doesn't include a name, but is signed as "Worried in Babelton." Unlike most letters, which are typed, this one is handwritten. Nellie finds the handwriting familiar. She takes out a Christmas greeting card from her drawer, sent by someone named Dahlia. The handwriting and the unique way of writing, like placing a heart symbol instead of a dot over the letter I, confirm to Nellie that the letter was written by Dahlia. Nellie realizes the boyfriend mentioned in the letter is someone she knows, none other than Jarvis. She decides to go to Jarvis, addressed to confront him. When Nellie reaches Jarvis' workshop, the door is open. She calls out his name and goes inside, only to find Jarvis lying on the floor. Shocked, she checks his pulse and realizes he is dead. Just then, she hears a noise from outside and asks if anyone is there, but there's no response. Nellie calls the police and reports a murder. She notices a bundle of cash in Jarvis' shirt pocket and carefully takes it, keeping it safe. The next scene shows the police arriving at the crime scene. Jarvis' phone and watch are still in place, suggesting it wasn't a robbery. Nellie explains this to the lady inspector. A detective, Michael, enters the scene. He is the hero of the story. The inspector introduces Nellie to Michael and praises her. The medical examiner determines that Jarvis died sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight. Michael observes the scene and says it looks like someone pushed Jarvis down the steps. He mentions that further details will be clear only after an autopsy and toxicology report. The position of the body suggests someone tried to clean up the scene. Nellie shares her guess that the killer attempted to erase evidence. The inspector assigns Michael to investigate the case. Nellie gives Michael the $20,000 she found in Jarvis' pocket. Michael begins questioning her since she was the first to find the body. Nellie explains that she wasn't very close to Jarvis and was more familiar with his girlfriend, Dahlia. Michael asks why she came to see Jarvis, and Nellie casually says it was just to check on him. She doesn't mention the letter Dahlia sent her. In the next scene, Dahlia arrives at the scene, distressed over Jarvis' death. Nellie comforts her, and Dahlia asks her to find out the truth about what happened to Jarvis. Nellie asks when Dahlia last spoke to Jarvis. Dahlia says she called him at 6:45 p.m. the previous evening, but Jarvis seemed in a hurry and acted distant, making her feel like he was avoiding her. Nellie asks if Dahlia had sent an anonymous letter to the magazine office, and Dahlia admits it was her. Nellie guesses correctly that Dahlia was the one who wrote the letter. She asks if Dahlia suspects Jarvis of anything, to which Dahlia responds that he had been acting very busy and seemed to be hiding something. Dahlia doesn't know who else Jarvis had been spending time with, but Nellie suspects that person might be connected to his death. Dahlia and Jarvis had been in a relationship for 3 years. Michael decides to question Dahlia further and invites her to the police station. Nellie insists on accompanying Dahlia, and the two head to the station together. The next scene takes place at the police station, where the hero, Michael, questions Dahlia, with the heroine, Nellie, also present. Dahlia mentions that she has her mother and stepsister, Colleen, in her life. She explains that she spent the entire previous night with her stepsister. Dahlia also informs Michael about her phone call to Jarvis at 6:45 p.m. the previous evening and admits that she suspected Jarvis might have been having an affair. Nellie tries to interrupt the questioning but is asked to remain calm by Michael. Dahlia's suspicion about Jarvis having an affair gives her a potential motive for murder, making her a suspect. Michael advises Dahlia not to leave town and promises her that he will solve the case. Dahlia's stepsister, Colleen, arrives to pick her up. Despite being a stepsister, Colleen cares deeply for Dahlia. In the next scene, Nellie secretly visits the crime scene. As she approaches the tree near Jarvis' house, she notices a pen lying on the ground. In the opening scene, the stranger in the hoodie had stood near this tree. Nellie picks up the pen and notices it has Bank of Babbleton printed on it. Suddenly, someone appears behind her. It's Peter. He explains that he left something at Jarvis' house the previous night and, upon returning in the morning, found the crime scene taped off. Now, he has come to retrieve the item he left behind. Nellie asks if he was there the previous night. Peter confirms that he and Jarvis, along with their friends, were playing poker. Nellie recalls that Peter was one of the 4 friends who said goodbye to Jarvis in the opening scene. She asks Peter what he left behind, but he avoids answering and says he has an urgent matter to attend to before attempting to leave. Nellie asks for the names of everyone who played poker. Peter provides the names and mentions that it was Jarvis' habit to play poker on the first Friday of every month for years. However, Peter finds it strange that Jarvis suddenly arranged the game on a Wednesday. He doesn't know why this change occurred and suggests Nellie ask someone who knew Jarvis well before leaving. As Nellie looks around the area, a neighbor approaches her. She introduces herself as Jarvis' friend and starts a conversation. It seems the neighbor didn't like Jarvis. Nellie asks if he noticed anything unusual after 10 p.m. the previous night. The neighbor says there was a lot of noise coming from Jarvis' house. Around 11 p.m., he noticed lights turning on in Jarvis' workshop, which reflected on his window, allowing him to see it clearly. However, the neighbor didn't see anyone going into the workshop or coming out of it. He seems to be in the process of selling his house. After gathering this information, Nellie leaves. In the next scene, Nellie calls Dahlia and asks her about the poker game Jarvis had with his friends. Dahlia knows that Jarvis always played poker on Fridays but wasn't aware of why he suddenly played on a Wednesday. Nellie asks if the $20,000 found in Jarvis' pocket could have come from the poker game. However, Dahlia mentions that Jarvis and his friends never played poker for cash. Nellie shares what the neighbor said but is warned by Dahlia not to trust him, as he didn't like Jarvis. Nellie then asks if the money could have come from Jarvis' furniture business. Dahlia says Jarvis never accepted payments in cash, leaving the origin of the money a mystery. In the next scene, Nellie visits Jody's house, one of Jarvis' 4 friends. Coincidentally, Michael also arrives at the same time. Nellie informs Michael about the poker game Jarvis played with his friends the previous night. Michael wonders why Dahlia didn't mention this detail. Nellie defends Dahlia, saying she was likely unaware of it. Michael and Nellie together question Jody about the poker game. Jody mentions that Jarvis seemed tense during the game and kept looking at his phone, which was unusual because poker rules forbid using phones during the game. Jody doesn't know the reason behind Jarvis' tension. She shares that she had worked as an apprentice under Jarvis for a while, so his death has affected her deeply. Nellie asks who won the poker game, and Jody reveals that Connor was the winner. After hearing this, Michael and Nellie leave. In the next scene, the hero and heroine visit Connor's house. Connor works as a bank staff member, so we'll call him a banker. While they are talking to Connor, his wife enters. She has understood that Connor was one of the last people to see Jarvis alive, as the police had come to question him. Connor explains that he only learned about Jarvis' murder when Peter called Jody, who then informed him while he was at the bank. Connor's wife says she went to the theater the previous night to watch a drama and returned home at 11 p.m. However, Connor mentions that he himself returned home at 10:15 p.m., before his wife. The heroine asks if he can confirm that he was indeed home by 10:15 p.m. Connor insists that after the poker game, everyone left together, and he reached home by 10:15 p.m. Connor also mentions that Jarvis had an account in his bank and relied on him to help manage his business finances, as Jarvis wasn't skilled in such matters. Connor's wife sarcastically laughs at this statement. The hero suspects that checking Jarvis' bank statements might reveal something important. He asks Connor if he knows anything about the cash found in Jarvis' pocket, but Connor denies knowing about it. As it's dinner time, Connor's wife tries to take him away, but the heroine asks him to sign a statement first. The hero finds it strange that the heroine is asking for a signature, as there's no protocol requiring it. However, the heroine has her reasons. Connor signs the statement with his golden pen. The heroine then asks Connor's wife to sign as well. She first searches her pocket for a pen but doesn't find one, so she retrieves a red pen from her handbag. It is a Bank of Babelton pen, the same model as the pen found near Jarvis' house. After leaving the house, the heroine explains the significance of the pen to the hero. While they are talking outside, Connor secretly steps out and speaks to them without his wife knowing. He reveals that his wife was unaware he had gone to play poker on Wednesday night. He explains that they were already upset with each other because she lost her wedding ring, and when he bought her a new one, it didn't fit properly, further annoying her. Due to their disagreement, his wife had been sleeping in a separate room. On Wednesday night, assuming she was in another room, Connor left to play poker. When he returned, he assumed she was still in the other room, but it turns out she had gone to the theater. Connor only realized this after she mentioned it to the hero. He admits that he can't confirm if she really went to the theater or not. The timeline of when Connor arrived home at 10:15 p.m. and when his wife returned at 11 p.m. remains unclear. The hero instructs Connor to bring Jarvis' bank statements to the police station the next day. In the next scene, the hero and heroine meet at a restaurant. In this area, the heroine knows everyone and is well aware of their backgrounds. Realizing this, the hero discusses the details of Jarvis' case with her. The toxicology report didn't reveal anything unusual. Neither the broomstick nor the light switch in Jarvis' workshop had any fingerprints. Even if the killer wore gloves, Jarvis' old fingerprints should have been present, but everything had been wiped clean, indicating that the killer had meticulously cleaned the area. Jarvis' phone hasn't been unlocked yet, so its contents remain inaccessible. The heroine lists her questions about the case. Who left the area while she was looking at Jarvis' body? Why did Peter come to the crime scene? How did the pen used by Connor's wife end up near Jarvis' house? The hero advises her to inform him directly about any evidence she finds in the case. A mutual understanding begins to form between the hero and heroine. When the heroine returns home, she notices that her window is broken. Inside the house, she finds a stone with a note attached to it. The note warns her to stay out of matters that don't concern her, signed with, Nellie. The next morning, the heroine is at her magazine office. She uses the news board as a murder board to analyze the case. The police consider Jarvis' girlfriend, Dahlia, the primary suspect, believing her motive might be Jarvis' possible betrayal. However, Dahlia claims she was at home with her stepsister during the time of the murder. The crime scene didn't reveal any weapon, footprints, fingerprints, or tire tracks. The killer had cleaned the workshop floor and wiped the light switch. The cash in Jarvis' pocket wasn't stolen, suggesting the killer might not have known about it. Connor's wife's claim of going to the theater might be false, as the stranger near the tree could have been her. A colleague of the heroine mentions that Connor's wife works double shifts at two places, making it unlikely that she went to watch a play. There's also a chance she had an affair with Jarvis, as she isn't happy with Connor. The heroine finds it hard to identify a motive for Connor, Jody, Peter, and Grace, who were the last people to play poker with Jarvis. Jarvis' neighbor had a history of disliking him and once pushed him down the stairs out of anger. The neighbor is in the process of selling his house. A photo of the neighbor was once published in a magazine, and a colleague shows the hero in the photo. It reveals the neighbor standing with Connor's wife, who is actually the neighbor's niece. The hero arrives and urgently takes the heroine to the police station, where Dahlia's mother is arguing with the hero for considering Dahlia a suspect. Dahlia's mother didn't like Jarvis and complains that Dahlia ignored her warnings about him. She believes Jarvis was only with Dahlia for her money and even suggests that he might have had an affair with someone else. The mother admits to hiring a private detective to keep an eye on Jarvis. Her plan was to gather proof of any affair and make Dahlia break up with him. She also reveals that the detective was watching Jarvis' house on Wednesday night and took photos. Hearing this, both the hero and heroine become excited, as Wednesday night was the night of the murder. In the next scene, the hero and heroine go to meet the private investigator hired by Dahlia's mother. At his office, they find the place ransacked, with the investigator himself missing. His computer has been stolen, and the security cameras have been smashed. While the hero steps outside briefly, the private investigator returns. It is revealed that he was the one in the opening scene taking photos from the car. Seeing the state of his office, he is puzzled, and the heroine informs him about the computer theft. The investigator reassures her that he had backed up all the data. When the heroine asks why Dahlia's mother hired him to watch Jarvis, the investigator mentions that he noticed a stranger in a hoodie sneaking around while taking photos and shares this detail with her. He then shows her a diamond ring, saying it's connected to Jarvis. The ring is worth $18,000, and Jarvis had been planning to buy it for 2 weeks. He had visited a jewelry store, selected the ring, and promised to return with the money on Friday. He had also reserved a table at a restaurant for Friday night, but he died on Wednesday. This information helps the heroine understand that Jarvis intended to propose to Dahlia with the ring, which is why he had been secretly preparing for it. To ensure the ring fit Dahlia, he had taken a friend with a similar finger size to the jewelry store. However, the investigator doesn't know who this friend is. When the heroine asks how he got the ring, the investigator explains that Dahlia's mother had purchased it from him, believing the ring was meant to unite her daughter with Jarvis and that it should not end up with anyone else. After explaining this, the hero arrives with a forensic officer, and the heroine leaves the investigator to continue her investigation. In the next scene, the heroine meets an elderly woman in her neighborhood who knows details about the banker's wife and their neighbor. The elderly woman reveals that the neighbor is planning to sell their house. Since the neighbor dislikes dealing with strangers, the banker's wife helped them find a buyer and sold the house for $300,000. The heroine becomes suspicious, believing the house was worth much more. However, the elderly woman remarks that the neighbor likely just wanted to get it over with. In the following scene, the hero and heroine meet Jody. The hero shows her a photo found in Jarvis's workshop, which has, "Happy Valentine's, darling," written on it. This raises suspicions of a connection between Jody and Jarvis. However, Jody explains that the photo was taken during a game they played as part of a bet she lost. Later, the hero and heroine go to a restaurant and start a casual conversation. During this, the hero learns about the heroine's personal life. Her boyfriend passed away in an accident 5 years ago. In the next scene, the people of Babelton gather for a community party. Here, the heroine meets Peter, who reveals that he visited Jarvis's house on the morning of the murder to retrieve something. The previous week, during a poker game, Peter's wife, Grace, had bet her watch and lost it to Jarvis. Grace was upset about losing the watch, and Peter had asked Jarvis to return it during Wednesday night's poker game. However, Jarvis refused, saying rules are rules, leading to an argument. After the crime scene was cleared by the police, Peter went to retrieve the watch. The heroine realizes this is the same watch Jarvis had likely intended to gift Dahlia. Currently, the watch is with Dahlia. The hero then arrives and accuses Dahlia of killing Jarvis, arresting her. Dahlia's stepsister argues with the hero, stating that Dahlia was home with her the entire night of the murder. However, the hero has evidence that Dahlia was the last person to call Jarvis at 6:45 p.m. While the stepsister mentions the messages sent by Dahlia to Jarvis later that night, she omits the fact that these continued until 11:30 p.m. The heroine recalls the opening scene where Jarvis received messages from his girlfriend, connecting this to Dahlia. The heroine informs the hero about a letter sent anonymously to a magazine office that hints at a betrayal. She reveals that Dahlia might have written it, but her omission of certain details frustrates the hero. The heroine firmly believes that Dahlia is not the murderer and promises to help clear her name. In the next scene, the heroine and stepsister check Dahlia's room to confirm her alibi. Dahlia claims she stayed home the entire night of the murder, having dinner and watching a movie before going to bed at 11:30 p.m. To prove this, they examine security camera footage outside Dahlia's room, which shows that Dahlia did not leave the house during the time of the murder. However, the hero says this is insufficient to release her and that further investigation is required. Disheartened, the stepsister and heroine return to Dahlia's house. The heroine reflects on Jarvis's time of death, between 10 p.m. and midnight. During this period, Dahlia and her stepsister were at home. The messages Dahlia sent to Jarvis suggest anger and frustration, but there is no evidence she left the house. Examining Dahlia's room, the heroine finds no alternate exit, ruling out the possibility of her sneaking out. While returning to the police station, Dahlia calls the heroine and apologizes for not mentioning the messages she sent to Jarvis. A major twist is revealed: the letter sent to the magazine was not written by Dahlia. She denies writing anything about Jarvis betraying her. The heroine recalls that the handwriting in the letter used heart symbols instead of dots, a detail Dahlia's stepsister would know. Suspecting the stepsister, the heroine returns to Dahlia's house. At the house, the heroine checks the stepsister's room and finds that her window has an escape route. Realizing she could have snuck out, the stepsister panics and tries to flee, but the heroine catches her. The stepsister confesses everything. She deeply loves Dahlia and disliked Jarvis, believing he wasn't good enough for her sister. She accompanied Jarvis to the jewelry store and intentionally influenced him to buy the ring, all while planning to sabotage the relationship. She sent the anonymous letter to the magazine, pretending to be Dahlia, to create a rift between her and Jarvis. On the night of the murder, she snuck out through her window and went to Jarvis's house to warn him to stay away from Dahlia. However, upon discovering Jarvis dead, she panicked and fled the scene, inadvertently running into the heroine near the house. Despite her actions, the heroine realizes the stepsister is not the killer. The next scene begins with the heroine at the magazine office, staring at the murder board and deep in thought when she receives a call. Before she can answer it, the banker's wife arrives and tells her not to take the call. However, the heroine answers it, saying, "Tell me, detective." Immediately, the banker's wife grabs a knife and threatens her, saying not to tell the caller that she is present. The call is not from the detective but from Dahlia, who informs the heroine that the hero has seen the backup photos taken by the private investigator. Dahlia reveals that the hooded stranger who broke into Jarvis's house was none other than the banker's wife, and she believes the hero has gone to arrest her. The banker's wife, still holding the knife, puts it down and promises to tell the truth. Dahlia, who has overheard the conversation via the call, listens carefully. The banker's wife explains that when she helped the neighbor sell their house, she deceived them by undervaluing the property, knowing they were unaware of its market value. She took a commission from the buyer and sold the house at a much lower price to alleviate her family's financial struggles, caused by her husband's overspending habits despite being a banker. Jarvis overheard this deal when the banker's wife was speaking with the buyer, and he began blackmailing her for money, as he needed funds to buy a diamond ring for Dahlia. The banker's wife paid Jarvis $20,000, which explains the cash found in Jarvis's pocket. The guilt of deceiving the neighbor weighed heavily on her, and to make amends, she worked double shifts to repay the neighbor. She had gone to Jarvis's house on Wednesday night, wearing a hoodie, intending to confront him and retrieve the money to return it to the neighbor. She waited in hiding until the poker game ended and only entered after hearing a pen drop. However, by the time she entered, she found Jarvis already dead in his workshop. She fled immediately but was unaware that the private investigator had taken photos of her entry. The heroine then wonders who could have killed Jarvis if not the banker's wife. She starts analyzing the photos taken by the private investigator and considers who might have stolen his computer. The banker's wife suggests that someone present during the poker game might have been observing Jarvis. While examining the murder board, the heroine has an epiphany. Jody knew about the ambulance leaving Jarvis's house after the incident. Jody had informed Peter while they were both at the bank. Peter had also mentioned this to the banker, who was with him. This detail confuses the heroine. How did the banker know about Jarvis's murder before the police formally revealed it? Suspecting the banker, the heroine confronts him at his house, and the banker pulls out a gun to threaten her. His wife is horrified and pleads with him to put the gun down. The banker, holding his wife hostage, orders the heroine to remain silent. At this moment, the heroine finally pieces together the events. The banker had discovered that Jarvis was blackmailing his wife. Outraged and seeking to assert dominance over his wife, who had grown distant, the banker decided to kill Jarvis. He believed eliminating Jarvis would make him appear strong in his wife's eyes and restore their failing marriage. As the banker moves to shoot the heroine, his wife bites his hand, causing him to lose grip on the gun. The heroine seizes the opportunity to knock the gun away, and the hero arrives just in time to arrest the banker. Although the private investigator's photos showed the banker's wife at Jarvis's house, the hero had deduced that she wasn't the killer, as she didn't take back the money she gave to Jarvis. The heroine, curious, asks the hero how he deduced that the banker was the killer and came to his house instead of hers. The hero explains that he realized people in Babelton always approach him directly when they have a problem. The case concludes with the hero receiving praise from the department for solving it. A bond begins to form between the hero and the heroine, marking a positive development in their relationship. The film ends on this note.